there's one last thing I want to do to bring it in line with the web page before we build the PHP, and that's just to give it the same menu and the same styling, because at the moment it looks completely out of it. We can get to this page from our web page, but we can't get back. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy and paste some elements from our index page. So the first thing I want to do is copy the CSS link, because we're going to use the same CSS. We're going to reuse some of the divs. Okay, copy and paste, reuse. This is the thing about, you know, you learn about object-oriented programming and things like that, is you reuse things. So this is obviously not object-oriented programming, but it's the same principle. And let's change the title while we're there as well. So what I'm going to do from the index, I'm going to actually take the container div and the header. So that's going to give us the all the menu items, and it's going to give us the nice container. So if we go back to my contact page, and then just here, let's just copy that, and then down here we can close that div off. Okay, and then let's just tab indent all this form, and then we can actually tab indent that, and then tab indent this to get all nice and lined up. Okay, so if I now look at that, we have our nice header, we have our menus, we can navigate through, but this element here is still very different. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to go back to our index, and I'm going to choose a container that we have there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the welcome div. Okay, all we need to do is copy that a little bit there, because this has all the styling already created for it. So we'll go back to our contact us, and then just run the form. I'm going to add that in, and then at the end of the form I'm going to close off that div, and then I can tab indent that form one more time to bring it in line. I'm going to save all that, and now if I now look at that page, there we go, the formatting's there. We have our nice similar type boxes, so there's no real kind of difference when you look at the pages. They all look the same. So now that we've styled it, the next thing will be to create the PHP. So we've created the page, now we need to create the PHP script. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a new file, and we're going to call this one post email.php. Note the .php, that's because it's a PHP file, or it's going to be a PHP file. And we can again use the standard HTML template, because we need to have some HTML in there for it to be understandable. In theory you could just have the PHP, but it's nice to have it surrounded by a true HTML template, just in case we want to put some HTML content in there. And again, we could just do a couple of things if we wanted to. We could just create the title and call it post email. Not that it makes much difference, but what happens is when you actually click or it gets posted, it'll load this page. So you can have content in there to say nice title, have a message completed, back, all that kind of stuff. So the only other thing I'm going to do to actually create PHP, and as I said in the first lecture, this course isn't about teaching you PHP, but you will learn some aspects of it. What we need to do, we need to do this, and that says, you know, this is the start of some PHP code, and then at the end of the PHP code you just close it with a question mark and a close bracket there. So everything now within this part here will be PHP code, and that we're going to do in the next lecture. Okay, so let's start creating this code. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new variable, and I will talk about variables in a second, called my email address. And I'm going to assign this a string of my email address, which is sean.t.cameron@gmail.com. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about strings is in PHP is not a strongly typed language. Now, what that means is that if I create a variable in something like C++, C, etc., you give it a type. So you give it an integer, a char, a string. And then everything you put into that variable has to be of that type. And there's some validation in some, some parts of that if it's an object. But if it's very strongly typed in that you create something of a integer, so you have to put an integer into it. With PHP, there's I haven't put a type. It's not strongly typed, which means that whereas I've given this a string, I could later on use the same variable and give it an integer value, and it's quite happy with that. So it doesn't do that kind of validation on the variables. So that's why it's not strongly typed, as opposed to something that's a strongly typed like C, C++. That's enough. I just wanted to explain that very quickly. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a subject. You noticed in my previous creation, I didn't create a subject line. That's because I'm just going to give it a bog standard subject so that I know that it's come from here. So you go question from just do it. You could easily have a subject line on your web page. I just chose to create it statically just to have, I always know it's come from this particular page. Now this next part, I'm going to create the variables that are passed in, and what we do, we say post. So this is something that's been posted into the page, and from the name of it, called name, you could probably guess it's going to be name. So this is coming from our name fields in our previous page, and that's now being deciphered by this $post and put into this name variable. So the next thing I'm going to do is email. Same again, and then this is equal to $post, and then again it's email, semicolon, and then next one is going to be message. Let me tab that in, sorry. And then that's equal to, again, $_post, and then guessed it again, message, and then the last thing we're going to need is a header, and this is required for our mail function that we're going to call. So we're going to say $header is equal to, and then from, and then you just type this as is, and then we say $name, and then open bracket, also brace, or whatever you call that, less than, I'll call it, so that's the easiest thing to call it, and then we've got like $email. Okay, and that is basically setting up a header saying, when you open up an email, if the email has a header that has this from name and email address, and that's how they know where it's come from, etc. And then next we're going to use the function mail, which is a PHP function, and we pass in $my email address, okay, and then comma $subject, comma $message, comma, and then our header, which is the email address information. And that's it. That is actually the PHP code to post all the information that's sent in from our contact us page. You could have some a message saying outgoing, say P, thanks for sending. Actually, we don't want that inside the PHP, we want that outside the PHP. Okay, so we know that, otherwise it gets interpreted as PHP. Thanks for sending. There is output commands that you can use in PHP, but it's easy just to use a nice p tag from within the HTML. So that's our PHP code done now. That's our PHP code completed. Let me just have indent that one, make it all nice and even. So I can't run this from my local machine, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this onto my web space, or a web space which has PHP, and then we're going to run it and show it working in action.